Okay, so let me tell you what happened at my cousin Neka's wedding. Because I was there. I saw everything with my own two eyes.
And I still have not fully recovered. First, let me set the scene. The venue was beautiful. I mean, genuinely, properly beautiful. A luxurious outdoor garden setting, tall green trees giving shade, the canopy decorated in pink, green, and gold with roses everywhere you looked. Somebody's auntie had organized the whole thing and she had done an exceptional job. The chairs were gold, the tables had proper linen. The banner above the main canopy said Nika and Chidi forever in big proud letters. Nika herself was sitting in the ceremonial chair looking like an absolute queen. Coral beads, lace dress.
Gele tied to perfection, veil flowing. She had been preparing for this day for 2 years. Of 2 years and with caterers, of her mother calling her every single day with a new opinion about something. Gele tied to perfection, veil flowing. She had been preparing for this day for 2 years. Of 2 years and with caterers, of her mother calling her every single day with a new opinion about something.
2 years. And she was glowing. Before everything happened, she was genuinely glowing. The guests were seated, the music was playing, everything was going exactly according to plan.
And then Auntie Biola arrived. Now let me explain Auntie Biola to you, because you need to understand who this woman is before the rest of this story makes any sense. Auntie Biola is not Neka's mother.
She is not Chidi's mother.
She is not technically related to either family in any
Direct way that anyone has been able to confirm in recent years.
She is one of those aunties that every Nigerian family has. The kind whose exact relationship to you has never been clearly established, but who shows up to every single event, sits in the front row. I eat the most food and have the strongest opinions about everything happening around me. Nobody knows how she gets on the guest list. She simply appears, fully dressed, fully accessorized,
Ready to participate. She had arrived today in a blue and gold Iro and Buba that honestly, and I say this with full acknowledgement of the chaos she was about to cause, looked stunning. Her gele was perfect.
Her jewelry was coordinated. She walked in like she owned the garden, found herself a seat with excellent sightlines to the main canopy, and settled in with the expression of a woman who had come prepared to have opinions.
The trouble started about 20 minutes into the ceremony. Nika was seated in the formal present portion to begin, looking beautiful and emotional and appropriately bridal.
Her mother was fanning her from one side. Her best friend was touching up her makeup from the other. Everything was proceeding correctly. Auntie Biola stood up.
This alone caused the first ripple of alarm through the guests nearest to her, because nobody had asked Auntie Biola to stand up.
There was no part of the program that required Auntie Biola to stand up.
This alone caused the first ripple of alarm through the guests nearest to her, because nobody had asked Auntie Biola to stand up.
There was no part of the program that required Auntie Biola to stand up.
But she stood, smoothed her wrapper, reached into her handbag, and produced a small gold ring box. She opened the ring box.
Now what happened next depends on who you ask, because everyone in that garden has a different version of events. But I was sitting close enough to hear, and this is what I heard. Auntie Biola looked at Nika with that wide, terrifying smile of hers and said, loudly, clearly, for the benefit of the entire assembled gathering,
My daughter, I have known you since you were this small. I watched you grow brown, and now that it is here, I must fulfill the promise I made to your grandmother. God rest her soul, that on the day of your wedding, I would give you this ring. It belonged to her. She told me to give it to yourself, but she is no longer with us, so I am here doing it for her.
Complete silence. The kind of silence where you can hear individual birds in the trees. Then Nika, who had been holding herself together beautifully for the entire ceremony, she covered her face with both hands and started crying. And I mean crying, shoulders shaking, coral beads trembling, the whole thing. Here is where the story splits into two separate dramas happening simultaneously, which is why it is so difficult to explain to people who weren't there. Drama 1. Half the guests immediately assumed these were tears of joy and started crying themselves.
Women were reaching for their handkerchiefs. One of Chidi's aunties was fanning herself vigorously. The woman next to me put her hand on her chest and whispered, so beautiful, with tears in her eyes.
Drama 2. The other half of the guests, those who knew the full history, were covering their mouths in horror. Because what Auntie Biola had not mentioned,
What she had casually left out of her touching little speech was that she and Nika's grandmother had not spoken in the last 11 years of the old woman's life due to a land dispute of legendary proportions. The idea that the grandmother had given Auntie Biola a ring to deliver to Neka was, to put it diplomatically, unlikely. My own mother, sitting 2 seats from me. Where did she get that ring from? And honestly, that was the question of the hour. Mama Neka, a woman I have watched handle every crisis in her life with the calm of someone who has simply seen too much to be surprised anymore, stood up from her seat. Mama Neka, a woman I have watched handle every crisis in her life with the calm of someone who has simply seen too much to be surprised anymore, stood up from her seat.
She walked to the canopy. She looked at Auntie Viola. Auntie Viola looked at her with that smile still fully operational, ring box extended, completely unbothered.
The entire garden held its breath.
What I say next, no repeat. Some in Igbo boy follow part, but essence, summary, headline.
The essence of it, the summary, the headline.
I am doing something beautiful. You are doing something, and we will discuss what exactly after the ceremony. Now here is the part that I think about most when I replay this day. Neka lowered her hands from her face. She looked at Auntie Viola and the ring box and her mother standing there with barely contained energy, and she looked at the banner above her that said Nika and Chidi forever.
And she looked at the 100+ guests all watching her with a mixture of concern, curiosity, and in some cases barely suppressed entertainment. Not politely, not quietly. Full, genuine, helpless laughter. The kind that takes over your whole body and there's nothing you can do about it. She laughed until fresh tears came and her best friend had to fan her. And then the laughter spread because that's what genuine laughter does. It's contagious. It doesn't ask permission. It just moves through a crowd like music. Within 30 seconds, half the garden was laughing. I asked Neka later, at the reception, after the food, after the dancing, after Auntie Viola had eaten 3 full plates and given her opinion on the DJ's song selection to anyone who would listen. I asked her what she had actually been thinking in that moment.
Honestly, when Auntie Viola walked up with that ring box, for about 2 seconds I genuinely thought Chidi had put her up to some extra surprise thing. Because that is exactly the kind of thing Chidi would do.
And then?
And then I heard her mention my grandmother and I thought about grandma.
And I missed her.
And I started crying for real.
And then I heard my mother's voice and I knew exactly what was about to happen and I couldn't stop laughing. So where do you think the ring actually came from?
I have decided not to investigate that question. Some things are better left as mysteries.
Wise woman, she always was.
Uninvited, fully committed, absolutely magnificent. Dancing to music that hadn't asked for her input and clearly didn't need it. Some things never change. And honestly, a wedding without at least one Auntie Viola is just a party.
Even Mama Neka's mouth was doing something that wasn't quite a smile but was clearly in the same neighborhood. Auntie Viola, for her part, looked around at everyone laughing and smiled wider, apparently deciding this had been the intended effect all along. Chidi appeared at this point.
Someone gone to the canopy to find his bride, laughing and crying simultaneously.
2 women in a standoff beside her, and 100 guests in various states of amusement and confusion. He looked at Neka. She looked at him.
He said, should I come back?
Which set her off laughing again. The ceremony after about 15 minutes of reorganization. The ring from Auntie Viola was quietly and diplomatically removed from the situation.
Neka put it in her own handbag with the air of someone filing a complaint to be addressed later. Neka's makeup was repaired for the second time. The music resumed, and when Chidi finally sat beside his bride and took her hand, and the proper ceremony began and the vows were exchanged with everyone present who was supposed to be present, it was perfect. More than perfect, actually, because there was something about the laughter, about the chaos, about the very human messiness of what had just happened.
The messiness.
It was beautiful. That made the real moment feel more real, more true, more like actual life and less like a performance. At least that's what I told myself when I was writing my speech at the reception.